Best Incorporated's webinar today. This webinar is on Rework and Repair of PCBs, soldering tips. It's actually on IPC-A-620 Rev changes. This is some of the latest and greatest changes. Since it's only a 45-minute webinar, it won't cover everything, but I'll try to cover as much as I can. These are, I think, are some of my favorites that I wanted to do and show you some of the changes. Now, if you want all the rest of the changes, at the end of this seminar, there's going to be a Redline document that's going to be available. I'll show you where to go to on the IPC's website. So please enjoy the next 45 minutes. My name is Norman Mier, and I am from Best Incorporated. I'm a Master Instructor for IPC-A-620, J Standard, 620, 771121, and I'm a CIT for 600. So here we go. Again, this is requirements and acceptance for cable and wire harness assemblies in accordance with IPC-A-620 Rev. It was released October of 2012. 1.1 is the first thing that we want to talk about. What they have done in this one is they reduced the size of it. The standard prescribes practices and requirements for the manufacturing of cable wire harness assemblies. Excuse me. Conflict occurs between the English and translated versions of the document. The English versions will take precedence. And what they've done, if you look at the old Rev A and the new revision, that you will notice that it is greatly reduced in size. They have moved it actually down, and more of it has been shot over to paragraph 1.3. Paragraph 1.5. They've done here is that they tried to correlate it to equal what it looked like in IPC A610 along with the J standard. If you notice that they have put actually the requirements for shall in brackets now, and they explain it a little bit different than they did in the old revision. The other one used to have what we referred to as text boxes, and you look at the word shall, it'd be a number 1 there or 2 or whatever, and then you would actually look for that text box with that number in the left-hand corner, and you would go on with that. And also what they did here was they rearranged the numbers on that a little bit. So it used to be the old paragraph 1.4. Now it's actually paragraph 1.5. These are some of the new changes. Paragraph 1.10, 1.11, 1.12, and 1.12.1. And with these here, these would actually, if you were looking at J Standard 001, you will notice that they come from that area, so they can explain a little bit more. Okay, so these again are the same things that you would see in J Standard 001. Paragraph 1.17, if you were to flip over to page 1-6, it talks about inspection requirements. In here, we're talking about magnification aids. And in this one, we give you ranges more than they did in the last one, like 14 to 22 gauge, 1.5 to 3 power. So you can see the differences in them compared to the old one. And you can see the revision A on the left and then the one on the right. And they give you smaller gauge wires to include that. Then some other new ones, which was paragraph 120 and 121, which is rework and repair and statistical process control. Again, if you were looking at the J Standard 001, you'll know that's where these come from. So, and yes, there is some other changes throughout it. They've basically, the ones that I didn't cover, a lot of that stuff was just renumbered. And again, at the end of this, you'll get a Redline document that I'll show you where to go to in the IPC's website, and you can pull it down from there and notice that a lot of its number changes or just little words here and there that were removed. paragraph 3.2. Now, if you flip over to paragraph 3.2, that is actually found on page 3-4. And in here, we're talking about strand damage and end cuts. Now, what they've done here was actually, I just showed you a picture of this right here, but where the actual change occurred at was in table 3-1. Now, in table 3-1, you'll see where I highlighted it, where it talks about one solid conductor, no damage in excess of 10% of the conductor diameter. Now, if you're looking in the J standard or the IPC-A-620, we usually construe that as like a lead off a component. So they actually put it in writing here because there was nothing. We don't talk about leads or in this standard, so they had to put something in there to help comprehend it a little bit easier. So then we jump to paragraph 3.4. Now again, a lot of these pictures that we're showing you is courtesy of IPC themselves. They've given me the permission to actually use these in my presentation. I figured it would work out better so you could see it a little bit easier, comparing it to what's actually in the standard itself. Now, this picture, paragraph 3.4, figure 3-10, was not in there before, and they actually added it to it. So we're talking about twisting of paired wires, single wires into it. And what this does, it creates resistance in the circuit for eddy current and stuff of that nature. You'll see this a lot like in IDCs for like your Etherlink cables. If you look back there, you'll see the green and white or the blue and white twisted together down through, or the orange and white twisted together. And this will help some of the feedback. Now we jump to paragraph 3.4. Paragraph 3.4, it's actually found on page 4-6. Now what they've done here actually was just one thing. They left all the verbiage, that's all still the same, a couple of deleted words, but that's just minor. What they did here was actually change the pictures. They actually deleted item D because we don't use solder mask on wires themselves. So that's what they deleted off of this one. Now going to paragraph 4.8, found on page 4-18. And here, actually, they added figures 418A and 418B. Now, 418A talks about wire overwrap. Now, this is on a turret terminal, as you can see. And on here, what it tries to indicate that when a wire is wrapped greater than 360 degrees, it stays in intimate contact with the wire at all times, or the terminal post. Wire overlap is where after 360 degrees, the wire doesn't remain in intimate contact with the terminal, and it overlaps itself. Now, later on, you'll find out when we go to the wires and terminal section that this would be acceptable for Class 1, but a defect for Class 2 and 3 in here, in this section. Now, if you turn over to the later areas of this, I just put these in here so you can see them. It's right there on that same page, table 4-1. What they've actually incorporated was tables throughout the terminal section of this area. Now, these are great little reference points. Yes, you still need to read what's acceptable on process 2, defect for 3, but it is the same thing that you're going to see in these tables, in like 4-1, 4-4, 4-3, stuff of that nature. It's going to be the same thing. It's a quick little reference to look at. So it makes you, the operator, the technician, or the engineer, a quick way to look at something when somebody asks you a question. These are actually the same thing that you would see in the A610 and J Standard 001. Section 5 is still the crimp termination. I just threw this up here, this picture right here. They didn't change it or anything like that. These are just some of the things that I picked out through the internet. So actually where you're going to go to is 5.12. Found on page 5-8. Now, 5.1.2, this was not in the last one. It's talking about the installation clearance of no support crimp. If you look at the crimp right here, where I'm actually using the arrows to move it around, you'll notice that it just comes off the wire. It's not, there's no insulation crimp or anything like that. So this is what we're talking about there, no support crimp to hold that steady right there. So it can bend right in here. And they've added a complete section on that. They talked about the target for all three classes, acceptable for class 2 and 3, acceptable for 1, a process indicator for 2 and 3, and a defect for 2 and 3. Next we're going on is to the next slide, slide 16, which is actually found on page 5-17. And again, this was not there before either. They added it, insulation clearance for the closed barrel. We got acceptable for all three, process indicator for 2 and 3, and a defect for all three classes. Then we flip on over to 5.7 or 5.3.5, found on page 529. And what we've done here was talk about the CMA buildup. Remember, CMA, circular mill area. That's the inside area of the barrel. Okay, that's what we're talking about. What they've done here was added 2 lines to the acceptable for all three classes, deleted the defect for all three classes. Then they added 1 line for defect for 2 and 3, deleted a line that says fill conductor extends beyond the insulation, and then they've added 2 lines to actually move the defect for all three from way up high, right below the acceptable, down below for acceptable for all three classes. They just moved it on down. Okay. Then we jump to the next page, 5.4, terminal ferrule crimps. And in here, what they did was just basically just add pictures. With the old revision, there wasn't anything there. Now we do have something available so we can see and comprehend it a little bit easier. Okay? So that makes life a little bit easier for all of us. The pictures actually were in the course material, but they were not in the standard, so they just brought them on over. Next we're going to be looking at is moving on to section 6, and 6.2.6, found on page 617. And this is pass-through connectors. You'll see these if you open up your computer. You'll see a lot of this stuff like that. Is where I've seen it at. And they added that complete section for that also. They talk about the targets for all three classes, acceptable for all three classes, and defect for all three classes. Now we jump over is to, in section 8, talking about the splices. Now, in section 8, throughout here they added a lot of information. So there was a major change to this, but I just did the one that had the newest pictures. Let's go there. Because like in 811, they added 5 bullets to acceptable for all 3 classes, and they added 8 bullets to the defect requirements for mesh splices. Then the same way with the wrap, they've added a lot of information here. And if you look at each and every one of them, you'll notice that it's the exact same changes, whether it's a mesh, wrap, hook, splice that they've done this to. And so they've all been changed up. Everything has been changed around. So a lot of the questions have been answered in this newest revision. Then we jump over to 8.2.3. And on here, we talked about crimp splices, contacts itself. This was not in the old revision, so they actually added a target requirement, acceptable for all 3 classes, acceptable for 2 and 3, acceptable for 1, a process for 2, a defect for 3, acceptable for 1, a process indicator for 2 and 3, defect for 2 and 3, and then a defect for all 3 classes. And again, this is 8.2.3, crimp splices contact. Then we jump over to 8.2.4, which is just a couple of pages away, wireline injunct devices, or Jiffy junctions. I'd never heard of these before, but these, it says a wireline junction device, sometimes referred to as a Jiffy junction. And these just connect you or snap into each other. These are just connecting 2 wires. That's all it is. And they talk about in here, if you don't meet these requirements, it shall be a defect for all 3 classes. So this was a complete addition to the standard itself. Now we're going to jump over to 9.1.3, hardware mounting retaining clips. Now, we talked about the hardware mounting before, and all they did was add the clips. You can see them here in the pictures. These are spring-loaded. They keep the screw in place. They won't let it fall out into your equipment. And what they've done here was actually added the whole thing to it. So they added acceptable for all 3 and a defect for all 3 classes. .914 was a complete addition. 914 is hardware mounting connector alignment. And again, if it doesn't meet the requirements of this paragraph, it is a defect for all 3 classes. Next, we're moving on to section 10, and this is on page 10-2. They actually added a complete table. To it. And you can look in your book. I just put this in here like this because if I try to pull this out of there, your words will be blurry, so I tried to prevent that from occurring for you. So I just show it to you just like it is. Just turn to page 10.2 and 10.3, and it gives some overmolding and potting. Visual anomalies. Then we go to 10.1.1.1 on the next page. And in 10.1.1.1 on page 10.4, what we've done here was, it used to say, if you notice there, I left it in black, says initial. We've changed that to say inner. But your initial molding or inner molding now has been changed to just say inner. And throughout it, what they did was just change the name for it. And then on the next page, you'll notice or actually 10.7, it says outer molding. Okay, used to say final, now we say the outer molding. Just give it a different name. The industry is changing things around for us. (10.2), found on page 1025, is talking about potting. It changed it to actually potting or thermoset molding is what they've done here. And they've actually added some really nice pictures to all of this. They've removed some information from the target area. There was about 3 to 4 bullets that they removed. Like in the first sentence, it just says potting material now. It used to say potting material extends over and surrounds the installation of. Now it just says potting material encapsulates all wires. And they, like I said, they added 3 bullets. Actually added 4, but and then they removed the 3 down in the acceptable area. They added 3 new bullets, removed a couple of words. They added acceptable for 1, a process indicator for 2 and 3, found on the next page on 1027. And then they've added on page 1028, they added 4 bullets to the defect section on potting and thermoset molding. Then we jump over, all the way over to section 11 and 11.2.4. Now what they did was move this from 14.2.2 to 11.2.4.1. And also doing is just actually showing you, because this is the measuring section, so they're actually giving you a reference point to measure for your breakout. Where would you measure from? And it goes from the center of the breakout cable itself. And you can see in figure 11.6 and 11.7 where they take this from. Then we jump to 13.9.2. And here we're talking about is the actual center pin damage. There's no illustrations. I actually pulled this from the internet itself. This is completely new. So in here we've added what is acceptable for 1 and 2, acceptable for class 3, a defect for 1 and 2, and a defect for all 3 classes. And again, this can be found on page 13-21 with the new changes. Then we jump over to 33. It's a couple of pages over, page 13-29. And here it is paragraph 13.10.2.2, talking about semi-rigid coax, surface condition, conformable cable. Okay, what they've done here was actually added to it acceptable for all 3 classes, no voids in the solder coating. Defect, there is void in the solder coating. Again, these were changes that were added as time progressed. Then we go over to 13.10.5.1. That's just a few pages over on page 13-33. And what they've done here is go down to 13.10.5.1, where they added this complete section. Again, it's about the conductor pin point. We got target for all 3 classes. On the next page, we got acceptable for all 3 classes, and a defect for all 3 classes. Again, this was not in the old one, so now we've added it because people have asked about the center conductor. And then on the next page, 13.10.5.2, again, it deals with the center pin conductor damage. We've added acceptable for 1 and 2, acceptable for class 3, defect for 1 and 2, and a defect for Class 3. Go over a few more pages to page 1339. And in here, we've actually shown you the biaxial multiple shield wire jacket tips. And in here, I just wanted you just to see that because I enjoy, there's a lot of questions always about this, about that, what it looks like, all the different pieces and everything like that. That's all I did. Next, we're going into table 14-1. And that's actually found on page 14-14. And if you notice that they've changed a few things around, they've added some information, rearranged it so it's better to comprehend. All the way down through it, we're trying to match and marry it to the 610 and the J standard doesn't have it, but the 610 does talk about minimum bin radius requirements. Next, we're going to go is to page 14-18. And what is in here is nothing more than the broom stick, or broom stitching. And if it doesn't meet the requirements of the paragraphs that we stated in this, oh, I'm sorry, we swept this out. This is actually what it looks like. What you're trying to do is keep the cables nice and flat with each other. There is some companies out there in the industry that actually do this. I've worked with a few of them, and it just keeps it nice, neat, and orderly. So you can see the shells in there. So if it doesn't meet the requirements of the paragraph, it is a defect for all three classes for the broom stitching requirements. Then we're going to jump over to paragraph 15. It's found on page 1521. Is some of these different paragraphs that are throughout there. What we did was added a few things to it. Shield jumper wire, 15221. With some other changes. Excuse me. That we thought you'd like to see, where they've added, especially into 15222, that's the complete section that they added to it, so you can see acceptable for all three classes and a defect for all three class requirements. Then we go to 15.3.4, found on page 1521, and actually we're just adding a wire to the outside shield as a ground. Okay, and in here, what it only talks about is termination soldered directly to the connector body as shown in figure 1546 shall only be used when required by approved drawing. In other words, your customer requires this, so that's what you're going to do. Correct? We all know that from years of experience. No matter what the standard states, meet your customer's requirements, and they'll be happy, and you'll be happy. Now what they've done here was added 15.2, or 17.2, I'm sorry, was these little things found on page 17.6. Now what we used to do with this here was, it is once it is locked into place to see, it's called tamper proofing. All it is just, we use fingernail polish in the military, but they actually got a material, and all you do is just put it along the edge of it, and make sure that nobody messes with it, especially if it's like a calibration requirement. But we used to get the squadrons when I was in the military, in the Marine Corps, that the organizational level maintenance guys would actually adjust the squelch pots or something like that, and then they come to us and say it doesn't work anymore. and all we have to do is realign the sculpt requirements or something else, and it would work fine once again. So we started putting this tamper-proofing on there to keep them from messing with it, is what we did. Now is 1734. This was a complete edition. Wire harness installation clamping. You can see where they've added a target requirement, acceptable for all three, and a defect for all three classes. So that's some of the greatest changes that I've seen in the standard. Now, there is a lot more to this. And if you look on your screen right now, you'll see the WHMA A620 Redline comparison. This is where you would go to on this. Now, let me bring this down real quick, and I'll go to IPC's website itself. Pull this up for you. Yeah, it's a little slow sometimes getting a response. Is all you got to go to here is, looking at the screen right now, you'll say new IPC-A-620 Bravo. You click on that, just like I'm doing. Give it a few minutes. We're waiting on for IPC.org to come up. You'll see it come up. Scroll down and say download the files showing significant changes to the 620 revision A and B. You click on that, and then you will get this. I highly recommend that you do this. That way you can see all the different changes, and you can see how it looks down through there as you're going down. As I'm scrolling down through it, you'll see the red line changes. These are your deletions. The blue area is the additions. The black areas are the ones that are the originals. So these are the things that didn't change. The blue is the items that did change, were added to, and the red areas are where they were deleted. Okay. Now let's pull this back up. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay, if you do have any other questions, you can email me at nmier@solder.net or call me at 847-797-9250. Again, my name is Norman Mier, and if you have any other questions, you can contact Katie Radcliffe at kradcliffe@solder.net, again at 847-797-9250. She is our point of contact. If you would like to have any training or anything like that or any further information, she will be more than willing to help you with it. So thank you, and have a nice day.